The Dark Peak district in Derbyshire is an area of rugged natural beauty with steep limestone valleys, and the peak area has dramatic gritstone ridges and stark moorland plateaus, which is situated in the Northern Midlands of England. This area of the Dark Peak gets its name from the colour and is known as UK's Bermuda Triangle, and also reports a high number of UFO sightings and other strange experiences. It is also home to over 200 plane crashes, including warplanes returning from bombing missions, which crashed and are now scattered wrecks across the moor, along with other jet aircraft wreckages from the 50s and 60s, who also found their grisly end on the moors. Dark Peak's reputation as a home for ghosts and aircraft apparitions continues through to today, as World War II bombers continue to fly silent and low over the district. The following are strange paranormal events that people have experienced and describe in this eerie landscape. Silent World War II ghost planes. Richard and Helen Jeffson reported seeing a mysterious ghost plane on August 3rd, 2015, while driving on the A6 in Rowsley, Derbyshire. They said the plane looked low enough to touch and low enough to notice that it was completely without sound. They feared it would crash, but instead it disappeared. The Jeffsons thought the plane was a 4-engine heavy bomber used by the RAF in World War II. Another witness was 88-year-old George Furness, who was an RAF veteran who knew what warplanes looked and sounded like, as he witnessed the same ghost plane out of his bedroom window. Richard Burley watched the same ghost plane fly low over some trees whilst golfing and agreed that it was a World War II bomber with an antenna and camouflage. Local military and airport officials said there were no air shows or historical plane flyovers in the area. There are very few of these planes left, and even fewer are operational, so their flights would be well known. Whilst all of the witnesses claimed it was silent, the real planes were actually very loud, so the lack of any sound reported would not be particularly strange for a phantom plane, as many of these ghost planes are often reported as being silent. In another account from April of 1995, a man called Tony Ingle witnessed a World War II era plane with propellers clearly spinning with no sound whatsoever, even though it should have been very loud. Ingle said that he watched completely baffled as the weirdly silent plane rapidly descended as if it were on a crash course before disappearing behind a hedgerow. When Ingle went to investigate, the horrific crash scene he expected to see was instead a tranquil field full of sheep. There was no indication of any plane crash, and indeed the plane was gone altogether, the sky completely clear. On March 24, 1997, police received hundreds of calls from people claiming to have seen a massive plane which looked like a World War II Lancaster bomber flying alarmingly low near the Peak District hills and seemingly about to crash. It was reported as silent and not the roar that one would expect from such a large propeller-driven plane. The plane was seen by farmers, 2 gamekeepers and a police constable named Marie France Tattersfield, who described the following. "It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. It was big and it was well below the legal altitude for night flying. All its windows were lit up, which made it look even more odd, as no pilot would fly blind at that time of night over these hills. Then the plane disappeared from view and was so incredibly low that a crash seemed certain, and the authorities were notified. A full search utilising tracker dogs, aircraft and hundreds of personnel and volunteers could find no sign of a crash." In 1997, a woman named Doreen Ushall was on an excursion to Derbyshire along with her husband, her daughter-in-law and her son-in-law when they were startled by an enormous RAF World War II plane flying frighteningly low directly towards them. Only oddly, the plane produced no noise whatsoever. So low was this lumbering giant of a plane, and on such an apparent collision course where the husband reportedly nearly drove the car off the side of the road in a panic. Dorian Usher claimed it was so vivid. It was just like being on a runaway and the plane was coming straight for you and you are in the way. The plane apparently went right over them, so close that they instinctively ducked, yet the whole while it was serenely quiet and would then silently disappear from sight. It seemed from its low altitude that it was definitely going to crash, so police were contacted. However, authorities would find that not only was there no crash, but that there had been no record of any aircraft being in the vicinity at all. Aircraft historian Gerald Scarrett describes an even scarier story, where he had found a ring amongst the wreckage of a warplane and after cleaning off the mud, found the pilot's name on the inside of the ring and was able to send it back to the pilot's relatives in the States. He later brought 2 men to the site to show them where he'd found the ring. As he was bending down to show them, he suddenly looked up to see the 2 men running away in a panic. A short time later, when he was able to catch up to the men, he found them ashen-faced. The men then told him that as he was bending down, a pilot in full flying uniform was standing behind him. Longdendale Valley is in northern Derbyshire and is famous for the Longdendale lights, which have been witnessed for centuries in Longdendale Valley and the surrounding area. The lights are called Devil's Bonfires by the people of the valley. One witness who saw the lights said that we had no idea what was happening or where it was coming from or what it was. The same witness said, "I still do not and cannot explain it to you, but I know what I have seen." Around midnight on the 14th of February 1995, Laverne Marshall was describing a terrifying nighttime drive which has become etched in her memory. Laverne had taken her son to Heathrow Airport and was returning to her home in the town of Glossop across a quiet road in the High Peak. With her in the back seat of the car were her 20-year-old daughter Stacey and her baby. She says, "We were just driving and talking when all of a sudden these little balls of light, 4 or 5 in all, appeared on the dashboard." Laverne said they were really bright and dancing up and down, just like they were being controlled by a juggler. "The first thing I did was look and see if a plane was going over, but there was nothing above us. There were no houses around and there were no headlights behind me. I said to my daughter, 'Take that torch off the baby,' but she shouted, 'Mum, I've got the torch in my hand and it's not turned on.'" Feeling powerless and too scared to stop the car on the isolated road, which was surrounded on all sides by miles of dark open moorland, Laverne watched the lights in the mirror as they slowly moved around inside the car. Then, as she sat quiet and motionless, the lights then split up into 2 groups and went to the back window, and then each moved back in single file to the dashboard, where they regrouped, almost as if they were controlled by some intelligent force. The family's nightmare lasted about 7 minutes, and then just blinked out when the car reached streetlights and safety. The encounter with the lights left Laverne and her daughter profoundly disturbed. Laverne said that, "When I woke up the next morning, I was still mystified and thought, God, what was it? What did I see?" Another young lady had another eerie experience with a different type of light. She was out on a Friday night, drinking with a friend, and then took a friend home around midnight. This is her story. "I was driving my Ford Escort listening to Pink Floyd and was heading up towards the moors. I had just passed a turn off on the right for Glossop and was heading uphill when all of a sudden this incredible pure blue-white light suddenly engulfed the whole area. I slammed the brakes on and just looked in awe because everywhere around me was as bright as day and everything was just so clear. I noticed the coal train in the valley bottom and could see every detail of it. All the trees on the far side of the valley were crystal clear. I jumped out of my car and just stood and stared and tried to find the source of the light, but there was none. But the light was everywhere. After about 10 seconds, the light suddenly went out, leaving me in total darkness. Feeling very apprehensive, I jumped back in my car to resume my journey, and all the way home I kept asking myself, what was it? Where did that come from? in the Peak District on the evening of March the 24th, 1997, between 8:30 and 9:07 p.m, eyewitnesses reported seeing a UFO and up to 6 RAF Tornado fighters flying overhead. The witnesses described the object as huge and triangular shaped, passing directly overhead at about 300 feet. The craft had pinkish coloured lights around its curved edges and a blinking blue light on its underside, and lit up the street like it was daytime. That night there'd been rumours of a battle with UFO where one of the Tornado fighters crashed. According to the story, when the triangular UFO appeared, 6 RAF Tornado interceptors engaged in an air attack where the UFO supposedly shot down the Tornado, which crashed in a reservoir on the moors. UFO researcher Max Burns claimed that the triangular UFO was tracked on radar at 9:55 p.m. that night by the Raw Signals Unit at the RAF base near the city of York. Authorities denied the event happened and that there had been no cover-up. The RAF then started conducting low-altitude training exercises, but were they really participating in an air and ground search for the purported missing aircraft?